your secret admirer. I'm writing to tell you how I really feel. You probably didn't notice, but for the longest time, I've always been there for you. I want you to know what I've done, and I hope by me opening up to you like this, you will hopefully feel the same way for me, and we can be happy together forever. I remember when we were both 13, you first transferred to my school. As soon as you walked in, I thought you were the most beautiful girl in the world. When your tranquil eyes crossed mine, even though it was for a brief moment as you scanned across the strange faces in the class, I wanted to be with you forever. I was heartbroken straight away, though when you paired off by some other guy to show you around the school, you didn't really notice me much. You were always with your group of friends who were so different from mine. Who am I kidding? I never really had any friends. The one thing that got me through all of these years of loneliness was watching you, admiring everything you did. The way you gracefully went through the day without faults simply left me in awe, day in and day out. As the years went by, you seemed pretty popular with both the guys and the girls. You were sought after the popular guys in the whole school. Even by the older ones, you shrugged them off. The girls loved how you looked after yourself. You always had your makeup and hair perfect, which made you admired but hated. It's sad, but it's human nature to get jealous. We all are guilty of this crime. What they ended up doing, however, was far out of line. I saw as they pushed you when the teacher wasn't looking. They would shove you into a nearby hard object, which, more often than not, was the wall. When you stumbled and slammed into the wall, the teachers would simply turn and say, "Watch where you're going, dear," and then go about their business, blissfully unaware of what is actually happening. Witnessing it happen every other day burned me inside. Seeing you have this torment for being better than them was painful to watch every time it happened. I hoped it died down, but it just got worse. I saw the bullies who knocked your drink over when you least expected it, just because the most popular guy asked you out. I was there when they set your bag on fire in the woodworks class because they thought you were condescending when you tried to help them with their work. And I caught a glimpse of that one time they actually threw you to the ground outside the school gates and kicked you until you cried, simply because you tried to tell the teacher about what they were doing. After that incident, they followed you home. Usually, they wouldn't do anything but yell abuse at you. The worst part was that you never know when they snap and suddenly attack you when walking inches away from your back. It tore me apart to see the girl I loved feel so vulnerable. I wanted to fix it. What I knew was that there were 3 main bullies that were constant. I knew more, but they seemed to do it out of pure pressure. The main culprit was a narcissist whore, Bethany. Beth was simply jealous of everything about you. All the things I mentioned that made you great burned her inside. She used to be the center of attention, and my God, she loved it. All the guys wanted to be with her. All the girls wanted to be her. The only difference is that she used it for her own personal gain and ultimately abused it. She slept with most of the guys who showered her in gifts or had their mommy and daddy pay for everything. She only hung around with girls who deemed lower than her. And she did this so they wouldn't be a threat to her God complex. But slowly, over the years of you being in the school, she eventually lost her reputation because of that. Because by then, all the attention was on you. The second who had a disgruntled grudge against you was that a-hole Chris. He asked you to the school annual dance in front of both his friends and yours. You simply rejected him like many others. But what made his instant different was that he ran off crying. He was publicly humiliated, which in school meant a lot. He denied liking you and lost all of his friends and reputation, so he took his frustration out on who he thought had caused all of it, you. The last person was Julie. She had it bad for you ever since the guy she liked always talked about how amazing you were, whilst not paying any attention to her. Even after she performed some, well, let's say, desperate deeds for him. During the last week of school, I knew they had something special planned for you. So, I took it into my own hands to deal with it, because I love you, and I didn't want your last few days at school to be ruined. The last person I convinced to not mess with you anymore was Chris. Now he was much stronger than me, being into all the school sports, plus the steroids meant that he won't be able to... I wouldn't be able to take him in a simple one-on-one fight. But in the end, that would be his downfall. I knew where he kept his steroids, and it wasn't hard to figure out since our school security and reputation was so low. There was no need in hiding it. I got his locker combination by simply saying I forgot mine, and the teacher gave me a list of everyone's combinations. Yeah, that's right. They have no sense of security in this school. I cracked open his locker with ease, leaving no trace of it ever being opened. I found the next shot he was going to use and squirted a bit out, then pulled a plunge back to where it was, leaving a considerable size air bubble. I figured Chris is no doctor, nor does he have any clue of how everything works altogether. He just injects himself. Trains in the school gym. I bought a pass for the gym and pretended to train. He eventually came into the school gym laughing hysterically with his new friends. Enjoy it while you can. It's not going to last long, said a thought that crept up into my head. He went into his locker, and not long after, he came out dressed in his training attire with a determined look on his face. He was ready to start. He was fine for a while, but eventually slowed down. He had a puzzled look on his face as his body slowly gave up. And eventually, the cardiac arrest settled in, and he was on the floor. People tried CPR, but there was no defibrillator around, since it was a school filled with teenagers. Who would expect a heart attack in a place like this? I smiled. I walked out before the paramedics arrived. It was already too late for him. Working my way up the list, Julie was next. She was always jealous of the way every guy liked you. I silently slipped through her window without her noticing. I knew her parents were out, so if she made a noise, no one would immediately come to her aid. I pounced on her while she was sleeping, pinning her down. I tied her hands to the bedpost and then her legs. I pulled out several jars in my bag, each one almost black. Upon closer inspection, if you looked carefully at the gaps, you would see small movement. They were full of all the creepy crawlers who would typically find in the bottom of anyone's garden. I took my time filling these up with every insect I could find. I wanted her to understand all the pain you felt all the time she was shouting abuse at you. hurting you, making you feel lower than you really are. I propped her mouth open with one of those plastic rings a dentist would use for a long procedure. I slowly poured each jar down her throat. Every time, her screaming was muffled a little more by the buzzing and scuttling noises of the bugs made as they adjusted to the new home. Tears streamed down her face as I repeated how all of this was for you. A few jars in, and I could feel the bugs in her stomach, which was where I had been sitting the whole time. But this time, she was pretty much passed out from the pain. When this happened, I waited, poured water on her face, slapped her until she responded. For punishment, I took off the ring from her mouth and poured water down her throat, making her swallow all the insects, causing them to go in a frenzy of panic. Eventually, during the 5th jar, the pain of all the insects burrowed into her internal organs, plus all of the internal bleeding caused her to pass away. But not peacefully, of course. I saved the words until last. Planned something special. I had something special planned for Bethany. She was by far the worst to you. She made your life a living heck. This was unacceptable. No one as perfect as you should have ever been the displeasure of knowing these people. So I carefully set the pieces and waited. One day, I got a head start. I skipped the last class, but no one noticed. Not even the teacher. This shows how much I was noted in school. By this time, I'd memorized her route home and waited in an archway. I knew she walked past every time. I waited and thought about what I was going to do and how it was all for you. Although I didn't have to think so much because I already had it all planned out. When I caught sight of her, I grabbed her and pulled her to the ground. She was kicking and screaming, but in this point in her journey, no one was ever around. The archway led to an abandoned derelict church. I dragged her away from the path into the building so no witnesses would intervene and no one would find her body anytime soon. I did my routine of securing her arms and legs to a post, so I knew there wouldn't be that much of a struggle. I also gagged her, for I knew she'd make a lot of noise for what I was about to do. I slowly pulled out my knife, making sure she caught sight of its shiny glimmer. I placed the point of it on her lower leg and smiled as she reacted to the sharp point of the blade. I slowly pushed down, making sure that the wound was clean as I slowly slipped into her flesh. It took a while, but eventually the knife's handle was touching her skin. I took my time pulling it out, making sure that the wound did not rupture with the easily recognized crimson liquid. That would have meant her death, but that would be too easy. As soon as the tip of the knife exited her body, I immediately wrapped the split with a bandage, applying enough pressure to cut the bleeding down to a minimum. I then placed the knife a little higher up her leg, doing the same thing. I stared into her eyes as she helplessly watched me do this over and over, all over her body. After every stab, I would say a remark about how you didn't deserve what she did to you. Eventually, her whole body was nothing but red bandages. She was barely conscious as I slipped the final blow to her heart. I can imagine you screaming about now. In fact, I know you'll be. And I'll be close enough to hear it. By you stopping, I know you've gotten this far to my letter. So, and start making my way in. It's pretty easy to get into your house after the few first times. You probably thought it was your parents who left this note in your room in the first place. No, it was me. Don't be afraid of the noise downstairs. It's only me. Put down the phone. I know by now you've got it in your hand, but I've got the phone line. Don't bother calling your parents if you haven't done so already. I've already silenced them. You can stop screaming now. I am always right outside your door. Unlock it now, and soon it'll be just you and me together forever. Lots of love, your secret admirer.